He and Malcolm drew each breath as if it might be his last. He watched the raptors with dull eyes. Harding took his blood pressure, frowned, took it again. Ellie Sattler was wrapping in a blanket, shivering and cold. Muldoon sat on the floor, propped against the wall. Hammond was staring upward, not speaking. They were all listening to the radio. "What happened to Tim?" Hammond said. "Still no word?" "I don't know." "Ugly, aren't they?" "Truly ugly." Hammond shook his head. "Who could have imagined it would turn out like this?" "Apparently Malcolm did." "I didn't imagine it," Malcolm said. "I calculated it." "No more of this, please. He's been saying I told you so for hours. But nobody ever wanted this to happen." "It isn't a matter of wanted or not," Malcolm said, eyes closed. He spoke slowly, through the drugs. "It's a matter of what you think you can accomplish. When the hunter goes out in the rainforest to seek food for his family, does he expect to control nature? No. He imagines that nature is beyond him, beyond his understanding, beyond his control. Maybe he prays to nature, to the furley of the forest that provides for him. He prays because he knows he doesn't control it. He's at the mercy of it. But you don't decide you won't be at the mercy of nature. You decide you'll control nature, and from that moment on, you're in deep trouble, because you can't do it. Yet you have made systems that require you to do it, and you can't do it, and you never have, and you never will. Don't confuse things. You can make a boat, but you can't make the ocean. You can make an airplane, but you can't make the air. Your power was much less than your dreams of reason you would have believed." "He's lost me," Hammond said with a sigh. "Where did Tim go? He seems such a responsible boy." "I'm sure he's trying to get control of the situation," Malcolm said. "Like everybody else." "And Grant, too. What happened to Grant?" Grant reached the rear door to the visitor center, the same door he had left 20 minutes before. He tugged onto the handle. It was locked. Then he saw a little red light. The security doors were reactivated. Damn! He ran around to the front of the building and went through the shattered front doors into the main lobby, stopping by the guard desk where he had been earlier. He could hear the dry hiss of his radio. He went through the kitchen, looking for the kids. But the kitchen door was open. The kids were gone. He went upstairs, but came to a glass panel marked closed area, and the door was locked. He needed a security card to go farther. Grant couldn't get in. From somewhere inside the hallway, he heard the snarlings of the raptors. The leathery reptile skin touched Tim's face. The claws tore his shirt, and Tim fell into his back, screeching, frightened. Tim scrambled to his feet again. The baby velociraptor pierced on his shoulder, chirping and squealing in panic. Tim and Lex were in the white nursery. There were toys on the floor, a rolling yellow ball, a doll, a plastic rattle. "It's the baby raptor," Lex said, pointing to the animal gripping Tim's shoulder. The little raptor burrowed his head into Tim's neck. The poor thing was probably starving, Tim thought. Lex came closer and the baby hopped into her shoulder. It rubbed against her neck. "Why is it doing that?" she said. "Is it scared?" "I don't know," Tim said. She passed the raptor back to Tim. The baby was chirping and squealing and hopping up and down on his shoulder excitedly. It kept looking around, head moving quickly. No doubt about it, the little thing was worked up and... "Timmy," Lex whispered. The door to the hallway hasn't closed behind them after they entered the nursery. Now the big velociraptors were coming through. First one, then the second one. Clearly agitated, the baby chirped and bounced into Tim's shoulder. Tim knew he had to get away. Maybe the baby could distract him. After all, it was a baby raptor. He plucked the little animal from his shoulder and threw it across the room. The baby curled between the legs of the adults. The first raptor lowered its snout and sniffed at the baby delicately. Tim took Lex's hand and pulled her deeper into the nursery. He had to find a door, a way to get out. Tim looked back to see the baby in the jaws of the adults. A second raptor came forward and tore a limb of the infant, trying to pull it from the mouth of the first. The two raptors fought over the baby as it squealed. Blood splattered in large drops into the floor. They ate him, Lex said. The raptors fought over the remains of the baby, rearing back and pulling the heads. Tim found a door. It was unlocked, and went through, pulling Lex after him. They were in another room, and from the deep green glow, he realized it was deserted DNA extract laboratory. The rows of sterile microscopes abandoned, the high-resolution screen showing frozen, giant black and white images of insects. The flies that had bitten dinosaurs millions of years ago sucked the blood that now had been used to recreate dinosaurs in the park. They ran through the laboratory, and Tim could hear the snort and snarls of the raptors pursuing them, coming closer. And then he went to the back of the lab and through a door that must have been an alert. Tim saw another door ahead with a blue biohazard sign. He slammed into the door and moved beyond it, and suddenly collided with something big. Lex shrieked in terror. "Take it easy, kids," a voice said. Tim blinked in disbelief. Standing above him was Dr. Grant, and next to him was Gennaro. Now the raptors were coming towards them. The animals seemed momentarily hesitant, surprised by the appearance of more people. Grant pushed the kids into Gennaro's arms. "Take them back somewhere safe." "But through here," Grant said, pointing over his shoulder to a far door. "Take them to the control room if you can. You should be safe there." "What are you going to do?" Gennaro said. "I have a plan," Grant said. "Now go on." Gennaro led the kids away. The raptors continued slowly towards Grant, moving past the supercomputers. The raptors came forward without hesitation, sniffing the floor, repeatedly ducking their heads. Grant heard the door click behind him and glanced over his shoulder. Everyone was standing on the other side of the glass door, watching him. Gennaro shook his head. Grant knew what it meant. There was no door to the control room beyond. Gennaro and the kids were trapped in there. It was up to him now. Grant moved slowly, edgily around the laboratory, leading the raptors away from Gennaro and the kids. He could see another door, nearer the front, which was marked to laboratory. Wherever that meant. He had an idea, and he hoped he was right. The door was a blue biohazard sign that the raptors were coming closer. Grant turned and slammed into the door, and moving beyond it, into a deep, warm silence. He was where he wanted to be, in the hatchery. Beneath the infrared lights, long tables with rows of eggs and lower clinching mist. Bakers full of paper glass dishes, all delicate laboratory equipment. The raptors entered the room cautiously at first, sniffing at the humming air, looking at the long, rocky tables of eggs. The lead animal whipped his bloody jaws with the back of his forearms. Silently, the raptors passed between the long tables. The animals moved through the room in a coordinated way, ducking them from time to time to peer beneath the tables. They were looking for him. Grant crouched and moved to the back of the laboratory, looked up, and saw the metallic hood marked with a skull crossbones. The sign says cautious, biogenetic toxin A4, precaution required. Grant remembered that Regis had said there were powerful poison. Only a few molecules kill instantaneously. The fluid glowed pale green in the ultraviolet light. Nearby, he saw the glass dish with syringes in it. The syringes were small, each containing a tiny amount of green glowing fluid. Crouched in the blue darkness, Grant reached for the dish of syringes. The needles of the syringes were covered in plastic. He removed one cap, pulling it off with his teeth. He looked at the thin needle. He moved forward, towards the raptors. He had devoted his whole life to study dinosaurs. Now he see how much he really knew. Velociraptors were small carnivores dinosaurs, like oviraptors and dromaeosaurs, animals that were long thought to steal eggs. Just as certain modern birds eat the eggs of other birds, Grant had always assumed that velociraptors would eat dinosaurs' eggs if they could. He crept forward to the nearest egg table in the hatchery. Slowly, he reached up into the mist and took a large egg from the rocky table. The egg was almost the size of a football. He held the egg carefully while he stuck the needle through the shell and injected the contents in the syringe. Grant bent down again. Beneath the table, he saw the legs of the raptors and the mist pouring down from the tabletops. He rolled the glowing egg along the floor towards the raptors. The raptors looked up, hearing a faint rumbling as the egg rolled, and jerked their heads around. Then they resumed their slowly stalking search. The egg stopped several yards from the nearest raptor. Grant did it all again, quickly reached up for another egg, bringing it down, injecting it, and rolled it towards the raptors. This time, the egg came to rest by the foot of one of the raptors. It rocked gently, clicking against the big toe claw. The raptors looked down in surprise to this new gift. It bent over, sniffing the glowing egg. It rolled the egg into its snout along the floor for a moment, and ignored it. The raptor stood upright again, slowly moving on, continued the search. It wasn't working. Grant reached for a third egg and ingested it with a fresh syringe. He held the glowing egg in his hand and rolled it again, but he rolled it fast, like a bowling ball. The egg rattled across the floor loudly. One of the animals heard the sound, ducked down, saw it coming, and instantaneously chased the moving object, glittering swiftly among the tables to intercept the egg as it rolled. The big jaws snapped down and bit into it, crushing the shell. It licked with its lips noisily and snorted. It bit again and lapped the egg from the floor, but it didn't seem to be the least distressed. It bent over to eat it again from the broken shell. Grant looked down to see what would happen. From across the room, the raptor saw him. It was looking right at him. The Velociraptor snarled menacingly. It moved forward towards Grant. Grant was shocked to see it happening and frozen in panic, when suddenly the animal made a gasping, gargling sound, and the big body pitched forward into the ground. The heavy tail spun into the floor, spat. The animal continued to make a choking sound, puncturing by an intermittent loud screech, foam plummeting into its mouth, the head flowing back and forth, the tail slamming into the tops. That's one, Grant thought. But it wasn't dying very fast. It seemed to take forever to die. Grant reached up for another egg, and saw that one of the other raptors in the room were frozen in mid-action. They listened to the sound of the dying animal. One cocked its head, then another. The first animal moved to look at the falling raptor. The dying raptor was now twitching, the whole body shaking on the floor, so much foam bubbling into its mouth. The second raptor bent over the falling animal, examining it. It appeared to be puzzled by this death throes. Cautiously, it looked at the foaming head, then moved down to the twitching neck, the heavy ribs, and it took a bite from the hind leg. The dying animal snarled and suddenly lifted its head and twisted, sinking its teeth into the neck of its attacker. That's two, Grant thought. But the standing animal rested free, blood flowing from its neck. It struck out its hind claws, and with a single swift movement, ripping open the belly of the falling animal, coils of intestine fell out like a fat snake. The scream of the dying raptor fell to the room. The attacker turned away. As if fighting was suddenly too much trouble, it crossed the room, ducking down, and came up with the glowing egg. Grant watched as the raptor bit it, the glowing materials dripping into his chin. That makes two. The second raptor was squeaking almost instantaneously, coughing and pitching. As it fell, it knocked over a table. Dozens of eggs rolled everywhere across the floor. Grant looked at them in dismay. There was still a third raptor left. Grant had one more syringe. With so many eggs rolling onto the floor, he would have to do something else. He was trying to decide what to do when the last animal snorted irritably. Grant looked up. The raptor had spotted him. The final raptor did not move for a long time. It just stared, and then it slowly, quietly came forward, stalking him, bobbing up and down, looking forward beneath the table, then above them. It moved decisively, cautiously, with none of the swiftness that it had displayed in the pack. A solitary animal now. It was careful. It never took its eye off Grant. Grant looked around quickly. There was nowhere for him to hide. Nothing for him to do. Grant's gaze was fixed on the raptor, moving slowly, laterally. Grant moved too. He tried to keep as many tables as he could between himself and the advancing animal. Slowly, he moved to the left. The raptor advanced in the dark red gloom of the hatchery. Its breath came in soft hissing through the flared nostrils. Grant felt eggs breaking beneath his feet, the yolk sticking into the sole of his shoes. He crouched down, felt a bolt of the radio in his pocket. He pulled it from his pocket and turned it on. Hello? This is Grant.
Alan? Alan?
Listen, he said softly. Just talk.
Alan, is that you?
Talk, he said again. And he pushed the radio across the floor away from him towards the advancing raptor. He crouched behind a table leg and waited.
Alan, speak to me, please.
Then a crackle in silence. The radio remained silent. The raptor advanced, soft hissing beneath. The radio was still silent. What was the matter with her? Didn't she understand? In the darkness, the raptor came closer.
Alan?
A tiny voice from the radio made the big animal pause. It sniffed the air, as if sensing someone else is in the room.
Alan, it's me. I don't know if you can hear me.
The raptor now turned away from Grant and moved towards the radio.
Alan, please.
The raptor was going towards it, but it was close. The Bigfoot came down very near him. Grant could see the pebble skin, soft green glow, the stretch of the dried blood on the curved claw. He could smell the strong reptile odor.
Alan, listen to me. Alan?
The raptor bent over, poked at the radio on the floor. Its body was turning away from Grant. The big tail was right above Grant's head. Grant reached up and jammed the syringe deep into the flesh of the tail and ejected the poison. The Velociraptor snarled and jumped. With a freaking speed, it swung back towards Grant, jaws wide. It snapped its jaws close onto the table leg and jerked its head up. The table was knocked over. Grant fell back, now completely exposed. The raptor lunged over him, rising up, its head banking into the inflated lights above him, making him swing crazily. The raptor reared back and lifted his claw foot to kick. Grant rolled into the foot, slammed down, just missing him. He felt a sharp pain along his shoulder blade, the sudden warm fluid blood over his shirt. He rolled across the floor, crushing eggs, smearing his hands and face. The raptor kicked again, smashing down the radio, shattering sparks. It snarled in rage and kicked a third time. Grant came to a wall, nowhere else to go, and the animal raised its foot a final time and tumbled backwards. Foaming came into its mouth. Gennaro and the kids came into the room. Grant signed to them to stay back. The girl looked at the dying animal and said softly, "Whoa." Gennaro helped Grant to his feet. They all turned and ran for the control room.